Hey fellas, so before I continue the video, I would just like to clarify that there are spoilers ahead. So you haven't gone out and watched the movie yet? Well, hey, don't let me stop you. I'm not your mom, I'm not your dad, but if you're ready to be disappointed, keep watching this video because I got plenty to talk about. Hey, what's going on everybody? TujoPanda back in action to talk about something else today. About something else? It's going to be a movie review. This is sort of a reaction that I had to a movie that I watched, and as you can see behind me, we're kind of in the midst of a zombie infestation, but don't worry. Somebody in a gas mask told me that this area was clear, so maybe I have like 30 minutes to an hour of safety before the zombies break in here and start gnawing on my head, but, yeah. I went and got to see Welcome to Raccoon City tonight. I actually met up with a friend from VR Chat, Primosphere. He lives relatively close to me. We went to the Egyptian Cinemark 24, or XD, at the Arundel Mills Mall. And we got to see the 725 showing. You know, we walked around the mall for a few minutes. You know, it was very nostalgic. This is the first time I actually happened to get out and see a movie for like ever since the COVID-19 began, because you know social distancing, and you never really were sure which establishments were sort of catering to various people out there that weren't willing to wear their masks for more than 5 minutes. And so we went over there, we talked for a bit, we got to catch up. We hadn't seen him for like several weeks now, and I went ahead and got into the concessions line. The ticket itself, you went to like a kiosk, it cost me about $13. Okay. By the way, I went into this movie as like a big Resident Evil fan. Okay, you already know this, or at least you should know this. I might have mentioned it a couple times. I released that little cinematic mishmash from Resident Evil 1, the remake, so you should probably have a good idea that I played a lot of the Resident Evil games, not all of them, but most of them, and I have a pretty good understanding of the source material, and I love the progression of the games. At least, the ones that were good, like the Resident Evil 1 that was a remake, Resident Evil 2 the remake, even Resident Evil The Village and Resident Evil 7, but this was an entirely different beast, okay? I got in the concessions line. I got myself a big, bag of popcorn with a tall, soda with that. And, I was going into this with small expectations. I mean, the Paul S. Anderson, movies, that whole Resident Evil series. Up to this point, that was my only real exposure to what I would consider to be a Resident Evil movie. I'm talking about, special effects, actual named actors, not this CGI crap. I'm talking about actual live-action movies. So, my expectations were pretty small. I mean, some of the trailer tidbits, that way would, flash references to the games. So, based on how the actors looked from the get-go, I had pretty low expectations, almost no expectations. I'm like, alright, well, this is more about hanging out with my friend and more about experiencing something together. So, let's just go ahead and enjoy the subpar movie and get going. So we sat there, we go through the usual messages and trailers for future movies coming up down the line, and I just kind of figured, okay, so how about the show? And they showed the movie, and for the next 2 or so hours, I guess it was like an hour and a half or something like that. The movie started about 7:20 and we got out at 9:20, so subtract a few of the trailers that were taking up some of the time, I would say a guesstimate of about an hour and a half. So a typical average movie. Now, something to bear in mind. I watched the movie from start to finish, and I paid attention to the whole thing. And surprisingly, even though it's been in theaters for several weeks now, there was a decent amount of people in that theater, okay? So, I kind of figured to myself, okay, for at least their sake, this is going to be a decent movie, right? Entertaining at the very least, even if it's a bad movie. I don't know how to feel about it, to be honest with you. I will say this, being a all-time Resident Evil fanboy, this movie was a kick to the balls, okay? This was definitely a kick to the balls. It was almost as if whoever the director of this movie, they got the Spark Notes for all the Resident Evil games out there, and they just basically picked the highlights of Resident Evil 1, 2, and 3 and decided they were going to merge the 3 into one presentation, and this was it. And, like, let's start at the very bare bones basic, okay? Like, Resident Evil. Okay, Resident Evil. Resident Evil is like a city that's, like, fairly big, alright? Like, I would guesstimate off the top of my head about 100,000 to 150,000 people in the Midwest. One thing I will say to the, like, film's credit, maybe we should just do it like this. I'm gonna do, like, a sandwich, although the good is very, very, very small, okay? Like, the good would be the smallest biscuit, let alone, like, maybe a cracker, you know? Like a Ritz cracker, like, on top. Then you got, like, a mound of shit as the bad. And then the good again would be, like, another Ritz cracker. Or, you know, something at the bottom. And whatever else goodness is what little bit of a taste in the form of, like, spices intermixed, like, you know, on that shit sandwich. And, like, not many people are going to enjoy it, okay? But that's just... I'm going to try to be generous, because obviously people at Hollywood, they don't understand games. And for the fact that they can't understand games, how do you expect them to be able to take, like, you know, the experiences of a game and package it into a movie? You'll be lucky, okay? In fact, like, the only experience from my childhood that I remember is that they took shitty movies like Mission Impossible and made a better game out of it. Like, the game creators, okay, at the time. I remember Mission Impossible being a better game than a movie. I remember, like, James Bond 007 GoldenEye being a better game than a movie. Rarely do, like, good games translate into good movies, which is something that the thick-headed people over at, you know, Hollywood don't seem to understand. But okay, take it back. All right. The good. All right. Time period. Check. It's still 1998. So no smartphones or anything like that. The most advanced piece of technology that you're going to get is a PDA. Okay, fine. Like, the cars seem reminiscent of the period. The weapons seem reminiscent of the period. The look and appearance. While there's been sort of modernization as far as the equipment that the people use, at least it's reflective of the period, 1998. Okay, fine, whatever. Resident Evil, it's certainly taking place in a Midwest town. And at least it looks like something that would exist in 1998. Okay, check. The police department actually looked like the police department, at least a reasonable adaptation to, like, a movie, from, you know, Resident Evil 2. Okay, that checks out. There was a Spencer Mansion. Okay, that checks out. I mean, the Spencer Mansion, granted, it's a lot smaller. It's less impressive than it was in Resident Evil 1, the remake. But, okay, we got a mansion. Check. A lot of names, like named characters, like Leon Scott Kennedy, or Chris Redfield, or Claire Redfield, or Chief Brian Irons, I believe he was mentioned, or Jill Valentine. A lot of names are mentioned, okay? Like William Birkin, he's mentioned. Okay, a lot of names are here. Even Lisa Trevor gets to make an appearance. Okay, check. It shows me, and like, you know, they actually got Lisa Trevor's appearance somewhat right. It wasn't a good, like, you know, illustration of her mode of character, but at least they took credence in Resident Evil 1, the remake, and made her a character in this movie. Okay. I'm going to try to be generous here, like, as far as the artistic liberties that we're taking with this movie, okay? I will try to be generous, okay? But, like, there's just so much here that they got wrong. They got the Spencer Mansion right. They got, you know, the orphanage next to the police department right. They got the police department mostly right, even though you only get to see it for a couple scenes. Yeah, like, some of the, like, acting was actually pretty good. And I'll get to that, like, you know, here and there. Most of the acting was pretty fucking terrible. I guess, like, you know, whatever good I could, like, lay praise to this movie. We have departed from the Ritz cracker, alright? Now we're getting into the shit sandwich part, okay? So, or the shit burger, if you prefer. I remember, like Raccoon City as a city being big, like 100,000 to 150,000 people big, This was basically a rat hole of town. It's almost like they took the Silent Hill approach in the portrayal of the town, and like instead of this big burgeoning metropolis with urban sprawl on the outskirts, they decided to like hone in on the classical American township from the 1970s that's now like fading into modernity. Because like the movie tells you straight up. Oh, did I forget to tell you that there's spoilers? Yeah, there's spoilers here. I'll be sure to include a like disclaimer at the very start of the movie when I make this an actual video. But I'm just gonna tell you right now, like the movie, their interpretation of events is that Umbrella had completely, for several decades, taken over the town of Raccoon City. Okay? That's fine. Okay, like, I kind of like that interpretation. Not very accurate to the game, but with the sort of, like, artistic liberties here, if that's the direction you want to go, fine. Whatever. Go ahead and take that direction. Also... Sorry. Other than that, like, the whole presentation is that Umbrella wants to leave Raccoon City. It wants to leave the town, and they don't really seem to care about what happens to the residents there. The residents, what few that you actually get to see, they are under the impression that once Umbrella leaves, they're going to continue to live there. Umbrella being this evil, maniacal corporate entity, they don't really care about the little people. They don't care about what kind of damage it has. Now, do you all remember William Birkin having, like, a father-son relationship with Claire Redfield? Remember that from the games? I sure as fuck don't. From the very beginning of the movie, like, you get this presentation of Claire Redfield and Chris Redfield living in the orphanage, like the same orphanage that was featured in Resident Evil 2, the remake. Apparently that's where they would get their test subjects, and it's from there that Chris Redfield continued his sort of progression as a character, until present day. Like, he became a model soldier, and he felt like he was obligated to help Umbrella wherever he could. This doesn't become apparent until Claire comes home. By the way, they took the idea of, like, Resident Evil 2, the remake, where it was, like, that truck driver who's, like, eating, like, a fucking cheeseburger. They even fucking included the cheeseburger in, like, that scene for whatever reason. Except now he's got a dog. And, like, the same series of events plays out. He runs into a woman in the middle of the road, except this time the woman doesn't get to him. The woman just walks off into the forest for whatever reason. His dog, though, investigates where she fell when, like, the fucking tractor trailer, like, hits her. And let's just say, even if you're a zombie, if you're about to get hit by, like, 24 tons or however, like, heavy a fucking tractor trailer is, your body is probably going to break to pieces, okay? Especially if you're a rotten corpse. Oh, I'm sorry, infected. But, also, the truck driver, he seemed like a sort of sympathetic character, like a minor character from Resident Evil 2 remake, but like somebody that you could actually sympathize with. In the movie, he's just a fucking straight up prick. Was even like sexually molesting Claire Redfield. Claire Redfield, as far as her portrayal as a character, mostly matches. I think they could have done a better job as far as her jacket, like adding that emblem that she had back in the original Resident Evil 2. But whatever. Again, artistic liberties. Let's just go ahead and, like, after that sort of thing happens, like, then we get introduced to Leon Scott Kennedy, who looks absolutely nothing like he does in the games. In fact, he looks more like he would be a contestant for being Carlos Oliveira, although he lacks the upper body like strength, but like his hairstyle is black, he's got facial hair, he doesn't look like he's a Leon Scott Kennedy. Remember how Leon Scott Kennedy had blonde hair and he always had this distinctive like sort of like trail of his bangs down here? Yeah, you don't get any of that with Leon Scott Kennedy. And the guy, throughout the entire movie, is a total fucking idiot who's basically the butt of the joke for any other character on screen. Even in the very beginning, he's being shat on by some of the more senior members, and they're fucking with him in this diner area. By the way, props to the director of the movie. They actually feature Emmy's Diner, the same diner that Resident Evil 2 featured where Leon Scott Kennedy and Claire Redfield meet for the first time. Doesn't play out like that in this movie. Remember in the remake? Even in the remake, they meet at some sort of rat hole of a fucking, like, 7-Eleven on the outskirts of town. Doesn't happen here. They meet at the police department because, you know, like, that's just how it goes when you have this interpretation of events. Also, like, the diner scene, like, that's fairly early on, you actually get to see all the characters, like, you know, from the get-go. You get to see, like, Albert Wesker, Jill Valentine, Chris Redfield, and I believe Brad Vickers. Although, like, you know, you also get to see some no-name actors, like Enrico Martini, I believe, and, like, you know, some of the other people that actually are dispatched to the mansion. And there's, like, this weird desync, because later on in the movie, Chief Brian Irons, he, like, makes reference to the fact that he dispatched Bravo Team. You never see Bravo Team, like, at all until you get to the mansion, all right? The only reference to, like, you know, Bravo Team is in the presence of 2 uniformed officers, Enrico Marini and, like, Kevin Dooley, I believe. Which, Kevin Dooley, he looks nothing like he does in the game. Like, Kevin Dooley, he was a big black dude that got munched on by a zombie, which is pretty embarrassing because, from what I recall, while he wasn't that good as a marksman, he had seen combat before and he was a senior officer. So, anyway. Getting too far ahead of myself. Let's scale it back. I'm just trying to retell you all the series of events and how they fucking, like, spit in Resident Evil 2 Remake's, like, face, including 1 and 3. But, yeah, so from the get-go, Leon's an idiot, alright? There's even a briefing, like, and you get subtle hints that Albert Wesker is not going to be exactly, like, playing ball with everyone else. Like, he gets a PDA that basically gives him inside information about the Spencer Mansion, which is where they're going. But instead of, like, a helicopter crash, they actually, like, make, like, jokes about how they become completely defunded, and they're surprised that Brad Vickers is still a helicopter pilot with them. To which Brad Vickers is obviously like, oh, go fuck yourself, man. But, I digress. Jill Valentine doesn't look like her in-game portrayal. And, like, I have always a mixed, like, sort of feeling when it comes to, like, you know, somebody that's portrayed as white or Asian being portrayed as Hispanic or black. And, like, it's fine if you want to do that, but, like, actually, I like the actor for Jill Valentine. The thing I didn't like is she looked nothing like her in-game presentation, as in, like, if you're going to go the route of portraying this character as African-American, okay, fine, do that. But at least give her the uniform that Jill was wearing so I know that that's the character. She kind of acts in ways that I would imagine Jill to act. Like, you know, in the diner scene, it was cute where she, like, you know, she's basically given a bet. And it's like, hey, like, I bet you can't shoot the ketchup bottle off of Leon's head, like, from this distance. She's like, okay, I'll take that bet. I'll like, bet you $20. Now, what's not in character for Jill is that she whips out her real gun, and then Albert's like, whoa, here, with this toy gun. And she ends up just, like, shooting Albert Wesker in the forehead with a dart, throws something at Leon to knock the ketchup bottle off his head, and then she takes his sandwich. It's like, this is a Jill sandwich now. Now, that's a stupid joke to Resident Evil the original when Jill was almost smashed flat by a fucking, like, trap in the Spencer Mansion. And that is so fan servicey. She might as well have just, like, you know, did some sort of a promo infomercial right then and there. And I wouldn't have even batted an eye, because I would have been expecting it. And as far as, like, her presentation, like, her uniform doesn't look anything like it does in the game. It's not that solid blue, like, you know, with the chest shoulder pads and, like, the vest and, like, all of her accoutrements. It's black. She doesn't have a beret anymore. She just goes in without any hat or anything like that. All of the, like, STARS Alpha Team members, they all wear just black. They could, like, pass for UBCS or any other branch of Umbrella at this point. They have nothing unique to them like they did in the games. They have no multicolored vests. Everybody had a distinctive style, but you could all tell that they were all stars, like members. But okay, whatever. One thing, the acting. I'm just gonna go ahead and get into the acting now. Jill was probably my favorite as far as the acting goes. Like, both, like, when she was just out and about, like, bantering with people, and when she was, like, in action shooting things up. And when she was getting all emotional with Albert Wesker, when he was, like, about to betray the whole team and stuff like that. I actually like that a lot more than, like, some of the other Stars members. Chris Redfield is creepily, like, under the impression that Umbrella has provided everything that this town has to, like, left to appreciate. And it kind of hits close to home when he's talking to Claire, when she breaks into his house and is like, hey, like, the Umbrella Corporation's is terrible. And he's like, you shut your goddamn mouth. It's for the Umbrella Corporation that we still have a life here. Even though, the Umbrella Corporation being what it is, it's basically been acting like a parasite sucking the life out of the town. That's what the movie tells me. So, like, I'm going by the movie logic here. In the actual games, what's a little bit more accurate is that the Umbrella Corporation, while they were definitely a parasite in sort of co-opting and sort of establishing control over the rest of the town, they also brought with it a lot of economic development, and they also, invested a lot into the township so that it was a nice, prosperous town. A lot of people liked Umbrella being there until they found out about, the horrific experiments later, but, I digress. But no, Jill Valentine, like, she was probably one of the more likable characters for me. The others were a little bit too generic, or they had something about them I didn't like. Like, Leon Scott Kennedy, throughout the entire movie, he's a complete idiot, alright? I know he's supposed to be a rookie, and in the games, like, he's actually cool in the fucking games. Like, if you play Resident Evil 2 the remake, even though his naivety kind of gets him into trouble, and he's like, simping really hard for Ada Wong, like, when it comes to action and, like, combat, he's actually doing things that would mark him as somebody with balls of steel. In this movie, he can't even really seem to fire a gun. He has to take a whole clip to take out a zombie. And, like, there was a scene where he finds the conspiracy theorist that was sort of telling Claire about, everything that was going on. And, like, he gets really close to Ben Bertolucci. Like, Ben Bertolucci's in a cell. If you don't know who Ben Bertolucci is, he's basically a journalist, although they made him look like a real nerd in this movie. But he gets, like, really close, and the guy's like, you gotta let me out of here. Like, let me make it a little bit, you gotta let me out of here. Like, and, he's just, coercing Leon to let him out of a jail cell, which, props to the movie for being that, like, detail-oriented as far as where Ben Bertolucci during this whole thing would probably wind up, but you didn't really make him either the 90s corporate ponytail-wearing asshole that he was in the original, and you didn't make him seem like the, like, hipster type that he was in the remake. So you fail on both counts as far as his presentation. You made him some, like, creepy conspiracy theorist that probably lives in his ex-wife's basement, but okay, whatever. Anyway, the dude, he grabs Leon's gun and holds him at gunpoint. Meanwhile, there's a zombie that is slowly turning into a zombie right next to him in the jail cell. Now, if I was Ben in that situation, I'd fucking take that gun and shoot the zombie before explaining to Leon why I did what I just did. But no, his idea is, I want to get out of this fucking cell as soon as possible. I don't care about this dude that's slowly turning in front of me. I'm going to hold Leon up at gunpoint. And, nobody thought to sort of say, okay, like, if I was in that situation, I'm sure that 90% of the cast, if they were in that situation IRL, would be shooting the fucking zombie before they're threatening Leon to be let out. You kind of take... you take precedent with what's right there that could potentially, like, rip your face off versus the instant gratification of being let out, But anyway, if I'm going to, like, focus on that as the only problem here, then we're going to be here all night. So let's just move this along. Chief Brian Irons in Resident Evil 2 and the original and the remake, he was kind of portrayed as a sick fuck. He liked to... basically stuff animals because he likes taxidermy a lot, and he was planning on doing that with the mayor's daughter. You don't get any of that. The police department is pretty small, okay? Like, this is a dying town, so... But, like, the dude is just basically... I don't even know how to describe his acting. Like, the first time you see him is in the briefing room, and in the briefing was so piss poor. Like, I am willing to bet that even in small town America, even for, like, the towns where their police force is so incompetent and corrupt, I can find a better briefing than what was portrayed in this movie. Like, so no one's taking anything seriously. I guess it's, like, because crime has been on the down low for so many years that they don't think that anything in small town America ever happens, but... they're just, like, you know, cursing at each other and just being, like, very condescending and, like, passive-aggressive to one another. And Cheap Brian Irons, he sort of, like, goes between being competent, like, he knows what's going on, and he's going to look out for his own self-interest, or, like, he's going to, like, berate somebody or talk down to them or bluster. So I can never really get a sense for his mode of character. He always seems like he's... you know, senile, like, all the time. Like, he's half senile. He's certainly got the age for it, but, like, his portrayal as a character wasn't very compelling. It lacked the sort of suave villainry that you saw in Resident Evil 2 Remake. It lacked sort of the impact that that mode of character had. This guy just seems like your gym teacher that the movie, like, you know, gave a uniform to. One of my favorite scenes that he had, where he was like, he realized what was going to happen. He realized that Umbrella Corp was pretty much going to destroy the town, so he was going to take to the roads and get out of town. And it was just so funny to watch Leon Scott Kennedy saying, well, wait, like, who's in charge now? Like, sir, like, and, he gets very passive-aggressive with Leon, which is pretty hilarious, and it's just sort of like, no, it's fine. You're in charge now. Like, I'm leaving. So, you know, like, I'm sure that your father is going to be very proud that his pathetic specimen of a son managed to rise to the ranks so fast and become the sheriff of a dying town. It's all up to you, kid. I'm out of here. What's funny is that Cheap Brian Irons doesn't get very far because there's roadblocks everywhere and people with guns shoot at him, and he magically manages to survive. By the way, while all of this is going on, everything I've described so far, like, the town is supposed to be experiencing an outbreak, alright? Like, the T-virus is in the water's table, and it's been happening for years. You get it first from, I'm going to call her Emmy, like, based on the diner. The waitress at Emmy, like, her eye is, like, bleeding visibly, and Leon sees that, and he's just like, are you okay? What's up with your eye? And she says, oh, I don't know, it's probably nothing. It's been doing that for a couple days now. And later on, you see these very same characters are exhibiting symptoms of something not being right with them. Like, you know, just being out and about and, like, not... Like, what I'm trying to say here is you never see the outbreak like you did in the Paul S. Anderson movies. Like, Resident Evil 2, in, like, the Paul S. Anderson timeline, that was probably the best of the bunch. Like, all of those movies combined, number 2 was my favorite because it actually showed a lot of zombies everywhere. Like, there's no zombies in the fucking streets. You get, like, a small crowd of maybe 20, but you never see a lot of them. So either like Raccoon City, according to this movie, is like basically got the population of less than 1,000 people, or all these people magically stayed home during the outbreak, probably due to COVID. But this is 1998, so no, like, in fact, the Spencer Mansion that I mentioned before. Characters do go to the Spencer Mansion. In fact, they fly in a helicopter, although why they fly in a helicopter when you can access the place on car, I don't know, because the, like, Bravo team, if you want to call them that, was consisting of only 2 uniformed officers, and their car crashed, and they wound up at the Spencer Mansion, which, I'm just going to go ahead and say right now, the Spencer Mansion had fucking more zombies than the entire town combined. I saw, like, you know, when the people go in and they start investigating and then they shoot some researchers, there were zombies coming out of the wall, coming out of the ceiling, coming out of my ass. It's crazy. Like, where were these fucking zombies hiding that they could all pinpoint on one location? Like, doors, windows, and everything else be damned. Like, they just came out of nowhere. And one thing that I will say about the action in the movie is that the special effects were decent, but considering that a lot of movies, even low budget movies can get them right, that shouldn't be anything to write home about. What I will say is they did this annoying thing where Chris Redfield, he should have been, like, eaten alive, okay? He put himself right into the combat, and there's zombies all around him, and he's, like, trying to fight them off, and he, like, runs out of ammo, and he's only got his pistol, then he's got his knife, then he's got, like, a lighter, of all things, to, like, light his path. And all the zombies seem to operate on the premise and, like, the logic of red light, green light, red light, green light, because only when he, like, lights the lighter do they start to move towards him. And when the lighter goes out and he lights it again, they're either gone or they're right next to his face about to bite him. So plot armor certainly was smiling heavy on Chris Redfield that day. One of the most outrageous scenes was the trucker that I mentioned earlier. His dog went out to the spot where he initially ran over a woman, lapped up some of the blood right off the ground, and was sitting right next to him. And it's starting to exhibit symptoms now, so, like, the driver's just like, come on, boy, you better not be getting sick now. I ain't got the insurance for that. And the dog just bites him on the hand, and now he's infected. And he's still driving this big rig, hasn't left town yet, and he, like, goes full force, crashes some vehicles, overturns it right in front of the police department, kind of like in Resident Evil 2, the remake, and the original. But Leon is a doofus because he's listening to some headphones. He's just like, and his eyes are closed. My thing is, like, if like a big rig with, like, thousands upon thousands of gallons of, like, gasoline explodes in front of your building, and you're wearing headphones, that wouldn't insulate you from, like, the tremor that you'd feel. You wouldn't just be, like, blind to that. You would probably, like, be like, whoa. You wouldn't just, like, sit there and be completely ignorant of the fact that, like, a big rig just blew up in front of you. What's even worse, and this is really something that made me laugh, is that the driver, in spite of the fact that, like, a crash like that would probably reduce you to, like, a meat sack, but the driver is still intact, and he's, like, on fire now, and just casually strolls right into the fucking police department as if to make a report and be like, yeah, my bad, man. But, like, Leon Scott Kennedy, he doesn't even look up until the last minute, and it's Brian Irons that has to save his ass. Ironically, the one person that would probably, like, at least according to the games, would probably be the first to fuck Leon Kennedy over, actually saves his ass. In fact, Leon spends more time getting saved by various people like Claire Redfield or Brian Irons or, like, anybody else. He's just a complete incompetent. The only time he ever gets any, like, sort of satisfaction of being an accomplished individual is at the very end of the movie. Which, again, it's a little bit far ahead of ourselves. So, the only reference that you get that the police department is not exactly doing so well is that the gate's closed and various zombies are starting to collect right outside of the gate. Why these zombies want in, I don't know, but a lot of zombies were gurgling as they're turning into zombies that, I want in. It's like that fucking, what was that show? Like, basically, there's the guy with, like, a small afro. He wears a suit a lot. Keith Eric show, I believe. He did that skit where he's just like, let me in! And he's trying to get into, like, various places, like a bus or, like, the gate. And he's just like, let me in! It's like that, but there's no reason for it. There's no purpose for it. The zombies didn't just wake up and... Well, I take that back. Here's the problem. If they were drawn by a loud noise, like the fucking Taker trailer, like, exploding by, like, a explosion that could probably be seen from space, they'd be rallying around that. They wouldn't just immediately go for the police department because there'd be nobody inside, at least visibly, until later. And for some reason, they just left the door completely open, like, at the police department. They're just, like, watching all of this happening, and it's like, don't you think you should probably be closing the door, barricading that shit? The gate's not gonna hold forever, bud. But no. Anyway, let's go ahead and take a detour from the police department. I will tell you this. Claire Redfield, Leon Scott Kennedy, and Brian Irons all link up. And Brian Irons, in spite of being, like, the sheriff of the police department, he has to be saved by Claire Redfield, wielding none other than a fire extinguisher. to kill a Cerberus. And the Cerberus looked like it was CGI'd into existence. It didn't look like a real dog. Impressive, if not for the fact that it looked fake as hell. By the way, like, Chief Byron Irons, for some reason, like, he didn't have a loaded gun. He just pops off random shots everywhere where he thinks the dog's going to be. And when he needs the gun the most and the dog's right in front of him, it's empty. And Leon Scott Kennedy, Wonder Boy as he is, bursts into the room after Claire's already killed the Cerberus. It's just like, freeze! Nobody move! Drop the gun! And Claire's just like, it's a fire extinguisher. Seriously, like, I could probably make this movie better with some light editing. I could probably put a laugh track every time that laugh track is needed, and it would probably be much more entertaining than what I got. But anyway, let's take a detour. I mentioned the Spencer Mansion. They all get to the Spencer Mansion. There's no, like, dog chase scene. There's no reason other than they find a blood trail, and they're like, oh, it must be Kevin Dooley and, like, Enrico Marini. Let's go ahead and investigate this shit. They find researchers munching on corpses, namely the corpses of Bravo team, which consisted of only 2 dudes, according to this movie. You know, like the uniformed officers. And in the middle of all this, like, Albert Wesker, he is cognizant of little things to do, like opening a secret passage that happens in the game when you play Moonlight Sonata, you know, the song by Beethoven. He finds this out because of his little PDA that tells him where to go and what to do. But, like, this is like the grand revelation for Jill Valentine. Oh, did I forget to mention that Brad Vickers is just kind of like chilling out in the forest and the zombies get to him and he freaks out and he takes off, but he crashes the helicopter right into the same room that Albert and Jill just so happen to be inside of. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Okay. It's funny that Brian Irons is trying to get a hold of Brad because he's hoping that Brad will be able to come over, pick them up, and they can all leave the city. But, you know, now that the helicopter's crashed, it's just like, oh no, now Brad's dead. What are you going to do now? This is like the worst acting of the movie, I feel like. Remember when Albert Wesker, he was portrayed as this cool, calm, collected dude that wore sunglasses all the time and was just like, you know, always on point. He only spoke when he needed to speak, and he had his little ulterior motives and agenda that he was following. Remember how cool he was? Like, shady as fuck, but you gotta admire the dude for being like an on-point villain that knew exactly what he wanted and knew exactly what to do to get it. In this movie, he's just an idiot that was just like, hey, like, I got and you get the revelation only when Jill asks for it. You don't, the only hints that you get along the way is the receipt of a PDA and that he's, like, receiving, like, you know, a beeper message, kind of like a text message in the 90s. And, like, Brian Irons back at the briefing was just, like, cracking wise with him about, like, you know, where he should take his girlfriend, what he should be doing, but tonight's not the night because they gotta go investigate the Spencer Mansion. I know I keep jumping around a lot, but I just watched it tonight and all the memories are still fresh. That's why I'm recording this video. So, Jill has an emotional breakdown. She's like, you were going to betray us? And Albert basically reveals, you know, it was going to be our one ticket out of here. We were going to be able to, like, you know, retire on this funny, like, get away from this dying-ass town that's going nowhere, and be able to just leave all this behind. And Jill acts like he, like, stabbed her in the back. I mean, I would have been more overjoyed by the idea of getting out of Raccoon City if it was dying to, like a company like Umbrella. But the implication here is that Albert's now working for a mysterious benefactor that supported his ass this far to do something. What's that something? Gee, I don't know. It's, like, you know, it's so, like, obscure and so, like, cleverly hidden that I just can't figure it out. With the greatest possible sarcasm aside, Jill basically reveals the message to Chris, who is, by the grace of God, survived like a horde of zombies. In fact, I don't remember Albert and Jill being attacked by zombies that entire time. Jill actually exposes herself to danger to save Chris's ass, because Chris was basically palling around all the zombies around him. Like, they were all, like, you know, on the precipice of munching on him. I think his pal, like, you know, Brad Vickers was in the helicopter. Like, he died. He died really, really fast. Richard Eichen, of all people, he gets munched alive by zombies. He had a shotgun. And I gotta say, that shotgun had way too many rounds for what he was popping off, like going. Well, at least he didn't Kurt Cobain himself, so. Yeah, like, Jill, Chris, link up. By this point, what's crazy is that back at the police department, Claire, Brian Irons, and Leon Scott Kennedy all unite, and they basically are just like, okay, let's use the secret passageway that I'm aware of back at the, orphanage to sneak our way into the Spencer Mansion, where we could probably, escape the self-destruct of Raccoon City, which is now public knowledge. Albert Wesker the whole time knew that Raccoon City was going to be destroyed by 6 a.m. Brian Irons had a inkling of knowledge, but he didn't know exactly when, it seems like, because he tried to skip town, but it didn't work out for him so well. Anyway, they go to the orphanage, and it's crazy. You get the reintroduction, I should say, of Lisa Trevor and the Licker, and there's only one Licker. The Licker looks pretty good, looks pretty accurate to the game, but it kills Chief Brian Irons, and Chief Brian Irons doesn't really put up much of a fight. Like, I would imagine if Brian Irons was actually in a life or death situation, he'd be exercising a lot more situational awareness and probably had the skills as far as his gun to be able to, fight his way out of any problem. No, he didn't do that. He didn't struggle too much. Like, the Licker basically snags him almost when he's off camera and, tears him apart. So, bye-bye, Chief Brian Irons. He just seemed like your deadbeat soccer coach from, school that was put into a uniform and told, hey, you're going to be a sheriff in this movie. And he's just like, all right. So, Claire Redfield, she finds Lisa Trevor, who has somehow befriended, Claire Redfield. Remember Lisa Trevor from the remake? Remember how friendly she'd be to people that talked to her? Remember how she would just be, okay for, smooth, casual conversation? Hell, she even shook, Jill Valentine's hand. No, she didn't. Lisa Trevor, her portrayal in the first remake, she was basically a wild woman that would sooner rip your face off than talk to you. She was capable of speaking and subcognitive thought, but she wasn't going to, invite you into her house for tea. Looks-wise, she looks kind of like she does in the remake, closer than a lot of other characters, but, I don't know. It wasn't very compelling for me, on top of the fact that, it's just she didn't have any of the deformities that she had in the games. You could have probably gotten a bigger actor to play her because Lisa Trevor was pretty tall and gangly and huge. She had the shackles on. Okay, I'm glad that you respected her look and appearance and what she had on her, but her she's not going to be friendly to people. Okay, she's a fucking mutant at this point, a G-virus infested mutant. She's not going to be very cordial with people talking to her. But somehow Claire, from this weird, twisty story of an interpretation that was done by the writers, she's just fine with Claire, and even Leon can't help but remark, you got some weird fucking friends. Alright, so Chief Brian Irons is dead, Richard Eichen's dead, Brad Vickers is dead. Who all's left? Well, the movie vaguely hints at William Birkin being the big bad, head of the Umbrella Corporation, at least the science department. And he's now an old man. Yeah, remember Resident Evil 2 remake when William Birkin was this old dude who was pushing 70? I sure as fuck don't. And remember how he sort of took Chris under his wing and was like a father to him? I sure as fuck don't remember all that. Okay, so the grand finale. Okay, let's see where this is all building up. William Birkin had a brief encounter with Claire Redfield when she was riding her trademark motorcycle, which was actually Chris's motorcycle in this movie, but, they had a brief encounter and they had a moment of clarity where he just looked into her eyes and she looked into his eyes and they realized who each other were. She didn't like William Birkin because she didn't like the orphanage that she was living at because it was doing unethical experiments on orphans as, test subjects. And Lisa Trevor was one of the test subjects that turned out bad. What's crazy is that if she was a test subject, you would probably kill her. In fact, there was like a file in one of the books that was like, Lisa Trevor, dangerous. But, you know, if you have like such advanced security, like Umbrella pretty much owns this town. They're like, they should hypothetically be aware of everything going on under the sun in this town. But Lisa just gets to have carte blanche. The only thing that's like keeping her behind are these shackles. She gets like free reign to go everywhere she wants. Just walk over here, walk over there. Like, there was no explanation. She doesn't even look like she's being contained as like a test subject. She's just like free to walk around this orphanage with all these small young orphans. And she must be like really fucking old if like Claire Redfield's like pushing in her 20s and like Lisa Trevor's still here, like just hanging out with the kids. Well, at least when they were still alive, because when you get to the orphanage, there's nobody there. But no, going back to like the fucking mansion, I just can't get over the fact that there were more zombies portrayed in the mansion than there were in the entire town. Like, that's inclusive of any NPC or non-important character that's been portrayed so far. Like, I guess that's where all the zombies in the town were. They were in the fucking mansion, you know? Just having a party, you know? Having blast. Just eating fucking, like, idiots that were walking in off the street. They didn't have to go nowhere. They didn't have to look for their food. They had all the food that they could have possibly wanted in the fucking mansion. Because people were dumb enough to go into the mansion in the first damn place. That's the only interpretation I can come to. Anyway, everything's revealed at the end in this incoherent, jumbled mess of a reinterpretation of the story. I can see what the director was going for in some places, but the execution was just so poor. Like, you know, you only give the audience a faint hint that, hey, something's going on. Hey, this is all building to something big. Hey, there's going to be this grand finale later. Albert Wesker has to go to see William Birkin to basically get the G-Virus sample. You don't get to see Hunk. You don't get to see, like, Hunk's team. You don't get to see people in gas masks with, like, their MP5s shooting up William Birkin. You only get to see that at the roadblocks because reasons. Fuck you. That's what my friend always likes to say. If I ask about something, he says, fuck you, that's why. Okay, well, I'm going to take that rationale and apply it to this movie. Why is this happening? Fuck you, that's why. That's honestly how I was starting to feel towards the end of the movie. I was just like, okay, nothing's been explained, nothing's been resolved, but there's the illusion that's been resolved. William Birkin is working on his life's work, and he's still kind of possessive. I have to say, like, William Birkin, some of the acting was actually not that bad. Granted, it didn't give me a whole lot to go off of, you know? He was just supposed to be the smug doctor that had his life's work and was not about to give it to Umbrella for whatever reason. Had his family with him, but his wife in the games was a researcher. In the movie, she just seems to be confused about the whole thing. Like, never had any inkling about his, like, her husband's work at all. Never asked her questions like, how's work, honey? Because, like, they're even in the labs. There's a fucking zombie on the table that's being, like, messed with. It's got, like, exposed organs, and it's just like, it's struggling to breathe. And, like, you know, William Birkin's wife, like, gets to see all this. Sherry Birkin gets to see all this. And all the wife can really ask is, like, what have you been doing down here, William? And he just responds with God's work. And it's like, okay. So either she's got Stockholm Syndrome and she's willing to ignore all of this because she trusts her husband that much, or that was poor acting or poor writing on their part. Because if you are suddenly exposed to what your significant other has been doing for the better part of their professional career, cutting open cadavers, making mutagenic experiments, and, like, horrific abominations against God, you'd probably, like, react a little bit more strongly than just ask a casual question, what have you been doing down here? Anyway, Albert Wesker shows up. He's been following that tunnel that he played Beethoven's fucking Moonlight Sonata to open the fucking, like, door down a deep, dark passage that leads right to where William Birkin's been doing experiments, and he's just, like, you know, got a little gunplay with the doctor. Doctor tries to pull a fast one, you know, the quick draw McGraw sort of technique, because he's not about to hand over his life's work. He shoots Albert Wesker. Wesker gets him, and he's on the ground bleeding out, and he basically gives the gun over to his wife and says, hey, like, get me the syringe, inject me, I need it, it's my medicine. And she tries to shoot, like, Albert Wesker beans her in the fucking forehead. She falls down, and now it's Sherry. And this whole scene, just the way I'm describing it to you, like, it does not do it justice how bizarre and weird it, like, unfolded. Because, you know, the little kid, like, she's mortified that her mother just got killed. Albert Wesker, he's like, you know, he's got the gun now again, and he goes for the virus, but he realizes that, oh no, like, William Birkin's already injected himself a bit, and he's, like, smiling and just sitting there, like, bleeding out, and he's about to, like, point the gun at the girl gets him, or Jill Valentine shoots him, actually. I think Jill Valentine's the one actually shot, but, like, here's the weird thing. I can't tell where the bullet came from. I can't tell. There was no muzzle flash from the little girl, because the little girl, Sherry Birkin's got the gun now. But, like, Jill Valentine accidentally shoots Albert Wesker, and from behind, Albert Wesker has accepted that he's probably going to die. So it's just like, okay, well, hey, like, there's an abandoned train in, like, the bottom. You can probably use that as an emergency escape route to get out of here. William Birkin wakes up and goes aggro and is still coherent, but also, like, mutating. The one good thing I will say about William Birkin is at least he looks somewhat like he did in his video game portrayal. You know, like, the big old eye over here on his shoulder and, like, all the eyeballs and, like, his, like, transformation. What impressed me the most about the transformation is that it was happening in real time with what looked like CGI and, like, practical effects at the same time, which is a rarity in these days where you're just, like, bombarded by CGI. But, like, you know, he's like steadily mutating, and then he realizes who's in the room, like Chris Redfield, and he's, like, talking to Chris and just being like, hey, you really thought that you were going to be a part and accepted of my family? You're just a fucking, like, insect. And he's, you know, mocking him, which is completely bizarre, because if you ever play the games, like, William Birkin and Chris Redfield, they had no interactions at all throughout the games. Nothing in that way. Like, there was no profound, like, interactions. The one thing that I will say about the movie, it was interesting putting a lot of these big name characters into the same setting and the same story so that they would meaningfully interact with each other. The problem is none of the characters really seem to act like their in-game counterparts, so it was completely pointless, you know? Like, Leon Scott Kennedy was a complete idiot until the very end of the movie, and that's being generous. Jill Valentine, kind of, like, to her, like, what I would imagine Jill would do, but Jill's acting, like, what she would do in a game was so subverted that, like, it wouldn't be so, like, apparent, like, this goofy sort of side to her. She, like, the goofs and gaffs would not be coming out. She'd be calm, cool, and collected. Almost to the point of being frozen when her best friend Joseph, or I should say her partner Joseph, I don't think they were friends, was being mauled by, like, fucking Cerberuses out in the forest in the first Resident Evil game. Well, I don't know. Like, and Albert Wesker, like, just seems like an ordinary dude. No personality, no real, like, portrayal that he's, like, a significant character. Just, like, you know, no allusions to him being, like, this badass like he was in the first game. Where the fuck was Barry Burton? Where the fuck was the rest of the Bravo team? Where the fuck was the rest of Alpha team, for that matter? I don't know. This is just way beyond me. But anyway, interactions between William Birkin and Chris Redfield, that Chris felt like William Birkin was like a father figure to him, and William's taking advantage of that until he reveals the fact that he didn't give a shit about Chris Redfield this whole time, which hurts Chris Redfield's fifis, and they have, like, this brief interaction until, like, Claire Redfield comes to save her brother and shoot William Birkin with a shotgun, and William Birkin's down there and he's still mutating, but, like, you know, Chris at least has the opportunity to, like, fill him full of lead. everybody now is like united in a group and gets to go back and go downstairs into the abandoned train tunnels and ride their ass right out of Raccoon City, just as it's about to get blown up. What's weird is that throughout the movie, I forgot to mention this, occasionally you get a black screen where it'll tell you the time. This is the time, okay? Because metagaming here a little bit, but you know that Raccoon City is supposed to be destroyed by 6 a.m. You don't know how it's going to be destroyed. You just know that the complete and utter destruction of Raccoon City will be happening at 6 a.m. So they constantly remind you what the time is now. The time is now like 12 o'clock midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning. It keeps jumping around, progressing to the very end. And it's like 5 minutes to go, like that Justin Timberlake song where it's 5 minutes to save the world. Like, they have to get their asses on this train that they don't even understand how it works, and they somehow get it moving. But oh no, William Birkin's still alive, and he rips through the ceiling, and he could do something. There could be some sort of glorious battle or some sort of interaction, something to reward you for all the build-up that has been going throughout this movie. Leon just pulls out a rocket launcher and is like, "Hey, ugly, fuck you," or "Eat this, ugly." Hey, ugly fuck, eat this. I forget exactly what it says, but it was something stupid. I'd rather be silent if I was to, make a badass scene. I'd rather remain silent and just do it than say something stupid, because it doesn't make you come off as a badass. The one-liners, he could have probably taken some lessons from Duke Nukem or something, because, the one-liners in this movie were pretty piss poor. But anyway, he gets to use his rocket launcher, and William Birkin dies. For real this time. Never mind the fact that if he fired a rocket launcher, what would realistically happen is that Chris Redfield, who is actively being held by William Birkin, and Claire Redfield, not 2 feet away, they'd probably die just as much as William Birkin did. Unless this is one of those advanced explodey outwards rockets that I'm not familiar with, because, I'm sure you could make a rocket like that where it explodes outwards instead of in a tight cone as opposed to just a ball of shrapnel and shit like that. Maybe. I'm not an explosives technician here, so I don't know about that sort of thing. But it was still stupid as hell. And it's just even Chris was just a rocket launcher, seriously? It's yeah, I found it in first class. And now you have the 5 survivors of the entire Raccoon City incident. By the way, there was a completely pointless, scene towards the end of the movie where it shows the town in a valley. It really was a town because, in spite of the fact that the games portray Raccoon City as something of a city with skyscrapers and shit like that, no, it's just a town, a bunch of suburban houses, and the Raccoon Police Department and whatever pharmaceutical facilities that Umbrella had on the premises. It's just a tiny town, something that you would see in the Midwest, one of those blink towns. If you don't know what a blink town, it's if you're on the road and you're passing by a town and you blink, that blinking has obscured whatever presentation of town is around you. It's that fucking small. And for some reason they had a cow just standing out in the middle of a field that didn't know what was going on. The town didn't so much get hit by a nuke or a missile or a thermobaric bomb. It just kind of imploded into the ground. And the shockwave caused the cow to basically disintegrate or something. It got blown off of screen. The train that they all used to get out of the city was knocked off of its rails. And so the 5 had to emerge on foot. Now, let me see if I can remember exactly who made it out. Okay, we got Chris Redfield. We got Claire Redfield, so the 2 siblings. We got Jill Valentine, Sherry Birkin, and I want to say... who is the 5th person? You know what? Maybe they're so unimportant, I don't even remember off the top of my head. They were just so unremarkable. Albert Wesker? No, he died of blood loss, in the labs. Where William Birkin was experimenting. So, of course, Leon Scott Kennedy. No wonder I forgot about that asshole, because he was so unhelpful and so just incompetent throughout the whole movie that I was just kind of whenever I see him, Okay, like, good to see you, bud. He was probably, ironically, the only person that looked the closest to his in-game representation, wearing the actual, like, similar look and likeness of his uniform. But it was so cheap looking that you would have thought that it was just some half-ass cosplay that some Japanese anime, like, enthusiast probably put on. I don't know. The ending just ends. Like, no profound message, no moment of rejoicing with the five characters, sitting around a campfire after that harrowing ordeal. No, like, great, like, experience or something like that. Not even a fucking montage. You get a pseudo ending. I say that because, like, the five are just shown emerging from, like, the train tunnel. And, like, even in the game, they at least share some words, some interactions with each other. They at least, like, reflect on everything that they've experienced thus far. The five in this movie, it just fades to black. Congratulations. Whatever, like, sense of anticipation or, like, enjoyment that I had of this place, what little there was, just evaporated in that moment. At the very end, you get some illusion that Albert Wesker has been revived, and he's been contacted by Ada Wong, which, if you're familiar with your in-game canon, Ada Wong was actually sort of subservient to Albert Wesker because he was the big bad that knew everything that was going on and, like, had to inform her about what was going on. I will say this, props to them making reference to the intro to Resident Evil 1, the remake, like, where a body bag sort of slowly rises up out of, like, off of an operating table. What I thought was going to happen was that somebody was going to shoot it. What actually happened is that Albert Wesker, like, rips out of it and he's completely okay now, but his eyes are not doing so well, to the point that Ada Wong has to hand him the cheapest set of fucking bad guy sunglasses I have ever seen in my entire life. Yeah, like, shit looked like it came out of a 90s dollar store. And, Ada Wong doesn't even particularly look that good. I think my mother, even at her age, would make a better Ada Wong than the actor they got in this movie. And she doesn't come off as sultry or classy. Her hair's not even done right. Like, she just, I don't know, it just seems so half-assed. That's a good way of describing the rest of the movie. Half-assed. It's like they got the cliff notes, the spark notes for the, like, what happens in the games. They make some light references to things, like this old woman that attacks Claire Redfield. She, like, scrawls itchy tasty on, like, a fucking, like, door in blood and then attacks her. Okay, that was written in a journal by a groundskeeper who was completely losing his mind and became a zombie. And the fun fact is you actually get to fight the groundskeeper who's hiding in the closet, who is now degenerated into a zombie. That was in the Spencer Mansion, okay? Not in Raccoon City. And, like, I don't know, Lisa Trevor, her being an ally that gives Claire, like, all of these keys, I kind of, like, the smallest details they strangely fixated on, like the fact that the keys that she received were vaguely poker themed, like diamond, like, club, spade, heart. Okay, that's reference to, RE2's The Police Department, but you're in the fucking, I don't know, you're in the fucking, like, orphanage, okay? William Birkin wasn't supposed to be that important, not as important as he was being portrayed in this movie. Where are all the other characters? In fact, like, William Birkin, his main, like, modus operandi was to sell his secrets to the government, like, as in the United States government, for, like, a tidy sum of money. Not, like, just being like, oh, my life's work, I will not give these up. He didn't speak in that accent, by the way. I'm just being, like, crass when I present all this to you. So, in summary, whoever the actors were, they weren't really casted well, alright? They were poorly casted. And for some of the characters, they were poorly casted insofar as it didn't really reflect the character in-game. Ideally, you would have the characters in-game look exactly like they do in-game, or at least make the effort to do so. And if you want to make the argument of, like, having the actor be, like, different, at least give them the same fucking clothes, okay? If the actor can't be the same for whatever reason, you can't dye their hair, you can't do this, that, the other, fine, okay? If their acting is good, that's fine. but at least make them look the fuck the same. Put them on the same clothes they had in the game. So I, like, as a member of the audience, I visually know that is that character, okay? Hell, even the original intro for, like, Resident Evil 1, and I'm not talking about, like, the remake, I'm talking about the original Resident Evil 1, the one that was, like, had a live-action intro, that would have probably made a better movie than that shit that I just spent watching tonight. So I think, let me just tally the numbers. So it was $13 for the ticket to see the movie. And I hadn't eaten dinner yet, so I needed some, like, a bucket of popcorn and a large drink. So that's $13 on top of that. So that's $26 as far as a experience that I had, like, going to the movies with Primosphere. And Primosphere admitted to me after the fact that, like, he had never watched, like, the movies. Like, he never played the games. He never played Resident Evil. He had no, like, expectations. He acknowledged that it was a bad movie, but he acknowledged it was also a fun movie and had some moments. There certainly were some moments in here that I liked, but, like, the anticipation never ever panned out. There was, like, no reward for being on the edge of your seat the few times that happened. The best thing I can sort of compliment it on is the fact that William Birkin actually looked like a grade A monster towards the end of the movie when he, like, fully mutated. It was stupid how, like, they were trying to make it seem like his face was still talking to Claire and Chris and that he could completely understand, when in the games William Birkin was complete mindless monstrosity. But, like, at least the presentation of the monster was good. The CGI that was heavily relied upon in certain scenes looked cheap. I know that this is probably not a movie that was made on a grandstand budget, but at the same time, like, if you're going to put the effort in, at least try to carry all the way through with the effort instead of going halfway. Hell, like, if I had, like, a cast of characters, some special effects artists, I probably could have made a better Resident Evil movie than whoever the fuck, like, directed that movie. Like, and that's just being, like, a fanboy, okay? I would probably get into contact with some people over at Capcom, probably, like, fans that actually have respect for the source material, like, worth a damn, and it could actually put together a better script to fill in the runtime of what would, like, hypothetically be the player just playing the game, and make some scenes out of that, like what the player has to do, what they had to go through, what's, like, apparent and stuff like that, and not deviate too much from the source material. But every fucking time that Hollywood or anybody else affiliated with Hollywood to get one of these movies out, they always have to take the source material and be like, oh, but I want to make it my life's work. I want to put my own twist on this. I want to put my own name on this. And it's like, fuck you, dude. You ruined, like, any headcanon that we had, any respect for the game that we had. You basically took and smashed in the dirt and stomped on it and then take a shat on it. That's what you did, okay? And that's what this movie did. I kind of already knew that wasn't going to be a good movie, but I wanted to be, like, that curiosity in your mind, the fanboy in me. I will say this. It was better than a lot of the movies that came from the Paul W.S. Anderson series of Resident Evil. Minus 2. Like, 2 still slightly higher than this because of, like, various choices that they had in the story, mostly the atmosphere. That was a big city that was overpopulated, or at least overpacked with people, that there were zombies everywhere, and that the stakes felt like they were high. In this movie, it felt like they could have probably snuck out the back of the police department at any time and made it out of the city on foot if they really wanted to. Like, that's what it felt like. There was no, like, stakes, like, hey, if we try to get out of the police department, we're going to be ripped apart, man. If we try to leave the Spencer Mansion, we're going to be ripped apart. It almost seemed like the forest would have been safer for, like, the Alpha team, like Chris, Albert, Jill. They would have been safer in the forest than the fucking, like, you know, mansion. And the mansion, it was so... How do I put this? The layout was so twisty and turny that you could never really tell, apart from the main floor, like, you could never tell where the character was supposed to be. It was almost like they only glossed over locations of what might be in the mansion from the game and said, okay, well, big creepy mansion where this guy called Oswald Spencer, that's, in the movie he's dead, but in the games he's obviously been alive for a while. Where he died, and no one's lived here ever since. But eerily, the lights are still on, and everything seems functioning, and oh fuck, there's a lot of zombies in here. Like I said before, like, more the most zombies that you're going to see in this entire movie. You're not going to see like a ton of zombies just walking around like in the games. The games I loved because I loved watching the breakdown of society happen in like the Outbreak games and Resident Evil 2 and 3. Like you got to see the infection spread and you got to like be a part of that, inside of that, and trying to survive that. That's what I loved about the games. The movie doesn't really do that. It's just like all the zombies are hanging out at Spencer Mansion. And like what few zombies that you see in the town don't really seem to reflect a town that's got a population of 100,000 people. It seems more like less than 1,000 people, and most people stayed at home. But yeah, the visual effects, like I said before, gun, muzzle flash, looks like a gun. Okay, like you didn't fuck that one up. But the equipment looked like less a police department slash like official police department, even a fucking police department that wasn't abiding by the standards set forth by like that particular township. It like looks so cheap. In fact, Albert Wesker, he's wearing a Kevlar vest in the game, but in the movie, like he gets shot and it's just like, and it's like, okay, did you not think undertaking this operation would expose you to elements such as gunfire that you needed to protect yourself from? Was that not a possibility of things that could have happened this day? And, like, I'm probably not even scratching the surface with this review, but I will say this. If you're a hardcore Resident Evil fan, get ready to watch a parody, because that's pretty much what this movie is. Like, you're going to be, like, kind of chuckling and laughing at how stupid some of the scenes play out. If you're just, like, Joe Schmo, you don't have any expectations, no, like, you know, understanding, you've never played a Resident Evil game, you've never done anything like that, maybe your mileage may vary. I don't know. Like, it really depends on how generous you are. If you just want a bad movie that you can eat some shit to and, like, watch, this might be up your alley. Other than that, it's not going to be that good. It's going to be a kick to the balls to anybody that played the Resident Evil games and enjoyed them profoundly. But, hey, these are just the opinions of some panda that you found online, so, you know, take from that what you will, but I have never yet seen a good Resident Evil movie. That's inclusive of all the Paul W.S. Anderson movies, even the fucking CGI movies that are the most accurate to, like, you know, the video game series at large. Even they suffer from some problems of, like, meandering story, or the story is just not really that compelling to begin with, or their retelling isn't that good. This movie, it's slightly below Resident Evil 2 of the Paul W.S. Anderson, like, line of Resident Evil movies that tried to pretend to be Resident Evil movies. Hell, the one thing I will give Paul W.S. Anderson in that whole movie series is that some of the characters that he introduced actually look like the fucking in-game counterparts. Granted, they appear at completely random times, and it doesn't really match the story to any great degree, but at least the effort was put in a place where I could immediately recognize that character. But where's Barry? I think that's something that the Paul W.S. Anderson movies, as well as, like, you know, this particular movie, didn't lend credence to at all. There was no Barry Burton. There was no Rebecca Chambers. There was no, like, there was no entire cast of Bravo and Alpha Team. It was just like they randomly picked the main ones and put them in this situation where it was like a convergence of Resident Evil 1, 2, and 3. And it was like a mishmash of various references to things they probably watched in some, like, internet cutscenes. If they did any research at all, which I don't think they did, I think they probably delegated that task to somebody else to give them the cliff notes and to, like, get this fucking movie project off the ground. But, like, there was nothing compelling, you know? So many missed opportunities. There was no Mr. X. There was no, like, Yawn. There was no, like, Shark. It's crazy because, like, Jill even makes jokes about that at the diner. She's just like, so, no, wait, it wasn't at the diner. It was at the briefing room in the Raccoon City Police Department. She's like, hey, so which do you think is worse, Albert? Getting eaten alive, like, by a giant snake, or getting mauled to death by a great white shark? You know, clear reference to Resident Evil 1, like, even the original and the remake, but you don't see it happen. In fact, the Spencer Mansion is actually pretty disappointing because there's no secret labs. If you want to call where William Birkin wound up the secret lab, That is pretty pathetic. It's like one small operating room. Big fucking deal. You mean to tell me a multi-million-dollar corporation invested all this time, effort, and resources into that tiny lab that they were feeding like test subjects from the orphanage next door to perpetuate this whole like, operation? Give me a fucking break. But hey, imagine my shock. I'm not surprised. Hollywood always has a bad habit of fucking up fairly good stuff. And the only people that suffer at the end of the day are the fans. So fuck me, I guess. Anyway, I'm starting to hear the zombie horde making its way over here, so I'm gonna get the fuck out of town. I will catch you guys on the flip side. Take care and peace. I will have a better one. Hey fellas, thanks for watching the video. I hope y'all enjoyed it. Would you care to hit that like button and subscribe for more? I'd greatly appreciate it.